Welcome to an episode of Rediscovered Movies. I'm your host, Nomfanelo. So, the film that I will be discussing is Romy and Michelle's High School Reunion. So, Romy and Michelle's High School Reunion is a 1997 comedy film that's based on the characters in the stage play Ladies' Room by Robin Schiff. It is directed by David Mirkin, who's known for Heartbreakers and as a writer on The Simpsons. It is written by Robin Schiff, who did Loverboy. The film stars Mira Sorvino, Lisa Kudrow, and Janeane Garofalo. Here is a synopsis. 10 years after their high school graduation, Romy, played by Mira Sorvino, and Michelle, played by Lisa Kudrow, haven't exactly accomplished everything that they set out to do. Despite their strong friendship, their personal and professional lives are still lacking. When they hear of their upcoming high school reunion, they take it as an opportunity to show their classmates how much they've changed, first by trying to reform themselves, then by creating a lie that eventually spins out of control. It was released in theaters on April 25th, 1997. In terms of box office, it made over $29.2 million dollars domestically. It opened at number two domestically with over 7.4 million. It was beaten by the movie Volcano. In regards to critical reception, it has a 3.5 rating on Letterboxd. It was nominated an MTV Movie Award for Best Dance Sequence. And at the time of this recording, it is available to stream on Disney Plus, Crave, and Stars, and is on demand, so check your local provider. All right, let's get into First Discovery. So, I think it was one of those movies where I probably first saw it on TV, so I don't remember my initial thoughts on it because it was like a long time ago when I first saw this. But I did eventually, I bought the DVD of it, so I must have enjoyed the first watch at the time. And then after I bought the DVD years later, I think it was HMV. I really dug the movie. It was quite enjoyable as a comedy. It worked. I thought the leads, they had amazing chemistry. They did a great job, obviously. And rewatching it now, for me, it still holds up. And honestly, I'm kind of like surprised that this movie didn't do well when it came out in theaters at the time, but has been considered to be a cult classic and all that stuff. So yeah, I would say this still holds up years later. So let's get into the highlights. So, obviously, with this movie, I love how it tackles the theme of friendship through our lead characters, Romy and Michelle. Because clearly, those two characters have essentially been inseparable since high school. And in ways, they are two peas in the pod because they kind of talk similar, and also to the way that they think at times, even though they have their own different personalities and all this stuff. But in ways that they're quite similar. An example would be when both of them they're watching Pretty Woman at their apartment. This was after the opening sequence. It was funny that both of them they poke fun at the movie essentially, but then as it goes on, they get teary eyed over the movie. And in a way, though, that movie with the scene that they're watching, which was when Julia Roberts' character gets turned down by the salespeople because of her social class and all that stuff. But in a way, like with what happens there, it kind of mimics what they went through essentially in high school, where they were rejected by the A group, essentially. And then, but then things turn around for them towards the end of the movie when they decide to reject them essentially and just be themselves. So good for that. But yeah, throughout the movie, they tend to, do stuff, a lot of stuff together. The dance scene at the nightclub where they're dancing to Staying Alive, that was quite funny, where they're both in sync with the moves and all that stuff. And also, too, as they're trying to prep for the reunion. It was hilarious that they both wear these like colorful outfits, and they're exercising in heels at one point. Hilarious. But yeah, as friends, I would say they work though, and in ways they kind of live in their own bubble essentially. And I like how as the movie progresses, their friendship gets tested. I would say all because of the whole post-its thing. They were trying to iron out the details, and that they argue obviously over that, which prompts them to drift their separate ways essentially. But initially, it started when Michelle thought that Romy gave her coworkers hand jobs essentially to in order to get the Jaguar from Ramon. But we all know that Romy was joking, but Michelle took it serious. But yeah, like it really tested them with this reunion, their friendship. And luckily, at the end, Michelle defended Romy when Romy told them that the Post-it story, essentially, and they become friends, and they stuck it through the end, essentially. So yeah, it's fun to watch them together because of their friendship, but also too with the actors Mira Sorvino and Lisa Kudrow. They have amazing chemistry, I would say, throughout the movie, and they work as a pairing. Because had, let's say, they didn't had that chemistry on screen, it would have fallen apart essentially. And also, too, the writing, I would say, really helped to lean into that chemistry essentially. Also, too, this movie is not just about friendship; it's about authenticity, essentially. Because it's funny that with Romy and Michelle, like in ways they want to seek validation from their peers to be likable, even though they don't really need to at the end. But they kind of seek that because in ways they were outcast in high school, and as like they're hearing the different stories and what happened to their peers, they find that their um lives, I guess, up to that point is not that desirable, which is why they decided to create the fake story with the business women and all that stuff. And I guess, yeah, this really shows that, yeah, at the end of the day, like, who cares what other people think? It should just live your life essentially, and as long as you're happy, that's all that matters. And luckily, they do learn that lesson towards the end of the movie. And I loved how they decided to, you know what, let's just toss the business women outfit and just put on their bright, colorful clothes and just have fun at the reunion, essentially. And good on them for confronting Christy and the A group, essentially, for being jerks to them. So, yeah, I would say those are important themes of the movie: friendship and authenticity. Also, too, as a highlight, the fashion, very reminiscent of the 90s, I would say. Because with both Romy and Michelle are practically the only characters in this movie that wears lots of bright colors. I mean, there's outfits in particular. There's a lot of latex or leather. I guess that's to show Michelle's designs because she is a fashion designer. And the only time that they only wear like dark or muted colors is when they're wearing the businesswomen outfit and the flashback scenes with them in high school. And I wonder if that was done intentionally. I assume so. But but yeah, I would say like with the costume choices, it really illustrated their characters essentially from when they were in high school till when they are adults, essentially living their lives. But yeah, it's funny that with everyone else, they wear like either dull or muted colors to show how boring, I guess they are. And also too, the supporting characters, they really illustrate high school stereotypes essentially. So first we have Heather, played by Janine Garofalo. She is essentially like the outcast, or like the loner, so to speak, similar to Romy and Michelle, because she essentially wears black. She's quite dismissive towards others, especially towards Toby, who really didn't really do much to her except being her cheerful self, essentially, which I guess could be annoying to some people, especially for Heather. But luckily, Heather decided to be nice towards her, like at the reunion near the end of the movie. We have Sandy, played by Alan Cumming. He is the nerd, essentially, who is in love with Michelle and had the notebook. I'm assuming the notebook is full of his thoughts of Michelle. I mean, must be a lot of thoughts since it's quite a big notebook. And of course, we have Christy, who is the popular girl. Essentially, she bullies Romy and Michelle throughout the movie, not just when they were in high school, but also too at the reunion. And of course, the A group, which is comprised of Cheryl, Kelly, and Lisa. Well, Lisa, like in high school, Lisa's part of it, but at the reunion, she is disbanded from the A group. So in a way, Christy and the A group, they are essentially Regina George and the Plastics from Mean Girls. If you guys have seen that movie, Christy, she kind of tells the rest of the A group what to do. At lunchtime, Lisa was complimenting them, and the others looked at her like she was crazy. So that was, yeah, before the whole magnets scene, and in a way that's like the Plastics in Mean Girls, where they're being told what to do by Regina. But yeah, what's interesting here that Lisa, in a way, her character's similar to Gretchen in Mean Girls, because Lisa, like, she's a bit more, I guess, independent, even though she does lean towards Christy in the movie, at least in the flashback scenes. But we see her at the reunion. She has a job at Vogue as an assistant fashion editor, and she dresses apart from the rest of the A group, essentially, who are all what pregnant. It's funny that they're pregnant at the same time. But yeah, Lisa, she's like independent, lives her own life essentially, and yeah, I guess she loves that essentially, and we're not surprised at this point that she drifted apart. So good on Lisa. And then, of course, we have Billy. Billy is essentially the dumb jock. He's Chrissy's boyfriend, essentially. But he is Romy's crush, essentially. And it was kind of scummy what he did to Romy in high school in terms of leaving her hanging. Of course, Christy, is involved, like when she tries to tell the story of how, oh, that Billy wanted to break up with her and all that stuff, but we all know that was not true. So yeah, it was great what happened to him, towards him and Chrissy, towards the end, essentially. So karma, that's karma. And also too, as a highlight, the transitions, when Romy and Michelle looking at the yearbook, I found they were quite seamless, because they show like where they're reading the book and it'll cut to a moment where it looked like it's a still, but then once it cuts to that scene, it shows the, I guess, the image in motion, so to speak. So example would be like when they're first looking at the yearbook, they look at Heather, where Heather's like um, probably in the schoolyard somewhere, where she's wearing that awful wig. Clearly, it's wig, and she runs into Cowboy Clarence, or Clarence the Cowboy in this case. And those two kind of have like their back and forth essentially in the movie. And it's funny that they end up being together towards the end. Hilarious. But in ways, I guess they're both kind of have their similarities, even though they kind of have their tension between them. And also, yeah, and then also another transition when it cuts to Romy and Michelle. They're wearing the doll clothes. This was at lunchtime before the whole magnets scene when Chrissy puts the magnets behind her back. I found, yeah, I really enjoyed that one. But yeah, I enjoyed the scenes with the yearbook and all that stuff. And also too, there were some tracking shots, and the tracking shots I found were quite effective. Example would be this is during the opening credits. So first off, with opening credits, I liked how it showed the close-ups of the fabrics, and some of the names were written as a tag you would see on the label on the clothes essentially. And then it cuts to Venice Beach. That's where Romy and Michelle are living at. And then we see like the helicopter shot of the outdoors before it goes into their apartment. I really enjoyed that. And then another moment is when Michelle, this is during the dream sequence, which is a fun sequence, by the way. But when Michelle is heading to the reunion, it kind of slowly follows her inside. It's kind of like that feeling when someone is watching from behind, essentially. That's probably the tone that the filmmaker, I guess, was going for. But I found that was quite effective. So there's that. And this movie has a lot of moments, I would say, fun moments. For example, Michelle, when she is trying to look for a job that clearly doesn't go well, I think most of it because of her own doing. At Versace, she essentially doesn't say much nice stuff about the customer. Which was hilarious because I get, yeah, as a sales associate, like you always have to be nice and all that stuff, otherwise it's never going to work out. I mean, that's the thing about customer service. And yeah, like when she's at the discount store, clearly she wants to get out of there because she ends up running away. Even though she does need the job, she runs away, which was hilarious. And then, of course, when Romy and Michelle are heading to the reunion, the car breaks down a few times, but then luckily it pulls through. And I'm surprised that it did not break down while they were on the road. But yeah, I found that was hilarious. Also, too, when Romy and Michelle, when they're dressed as businesswomen, they ask the waitress for the businesswomen special, which we all know there's no such thing. But yeah, that was hilarious. And then yeah, with Michelle's dream sequence, is funny. At one point, she gets her run over by Sandy's limo, but the way that she gets hit is like very exaggerated, where she goes all the way up and then tumbles down to the ground. That was hilarious. And then, of course, when both Romy and Michelle are old, they still have their tiff. Hilarious. And then, of course, yeah, like at the reunion when Romy and Michelle, the whole sequence of them confronting Christy, and then it leads to them having this interpretive dance with Sandy. I mean, what a moment that was! That was quite unexpected, but hey, that's a moment, fun moment, I would say. And lastly, the soundtrack. I found the soundtrack was quite decent. So it's a lot of like 80s and 90s songs. The ones that stood out to me is Just a Girl by No Doubt, which is played during the opening sequence. We have Be My Lover by La Bouche and Staying Alive by Entrance. Those are played during the nightclub sequence when Romy and Michelle visit there. And then, of course, we have Venus by Bananarama. That's when they are doing the makeover as they re enter the reunion. That was nice. And then, of course, Time After Time by Cyndi Lauper. Now, that's, I would say, an integral song in the movie because that's played twice. The first time when both Romy and Michelle are dressed up as the Madonnas. This was when she was supposed to dance with Billy, and of course, Billy stood her up, obviously, because we knew that it was a setup at that point. And then second time is when Romy is doing the dance with Michelle and Sandy, and yeah, I would say, of course, a good song with Time After Time, and yeah, it worked in this movie. All right, let's get into the lowlights. So I don't really have too much to add for this section, but I would say for one, since Michelle is a fashion designer, it would have been nice to have scenes of her trying to make the clothes. Because clearly, yeah, Romy complements her style, also too with Lisa and the other people at the reunion. But it would have been cool, let's say, if there was a moment or two where Michelle's working on clothes as she's trying to look for a job. Because maybe the opening credits supposed to hint that because you see a pair of hands working on fabric, but it's unclear. But I would say it's implied that's Michelle since she's a fashion designer. But yeah, and then also too as a low light, it's funny that essentially Michelle, Sandy, he has a crush on Michelle essentially, and of course, years later when they meet at the reunion, he professes his love to Michelle, and it's funny that she easily accepted to be his girlfriend at the end, despite having no prior interest in Sandy romantically, apart from the dream sequence um, when Sandy had the plastic surgery and him being rich and all that stuff. So I wonder if she decided to accept being his girlfriend because of his status, maybe because I didn't really get the chemistry between them unless if that was the intention. But but yeah, I felt like it was a bit too easy for her to just accept it willingly at that point of the movie. And as a last one, when Romy and Michelle they have their own department store essentially, I felt as though they could have done have a different name essentially for that instead of just naming it Romy and Michelle. Plus, also too, does Romy had an interest in fashion? I mean, of course that she wears Michelle's designs and all that stuff, but outside of that, I never really seen her take an interest in fashion. I don't know. Or I'm wondering, like, does she work on the business end? But it's unclear because when it cuts to them, what, 6 months later, they're both working at the front of the department store, folding clothes and all that stuff. So I don't know. It could have been a bit more clear on that. All right, let's get into trivia. So there was a lot of fun facts for this movie, so I'll only share a select few. So, as I mentioned earlier, the characters Roy and Michelle, they were in the 1988 stage play Ladies' Room, which was written by Robin Schiff, who did the screenplay for this movie. So, Schiff was in the comedy troupe The Groundlings with Lisa Kudrow, who starred in the play as Michelle opposite Christy Meller as Romy. Schiff said her inspiration for the characters of Romy and Michelle were loosely based just visually on these girls I used to see going into a club on Sunset Boulevard. You'd see these two friends, and they looked like they got dressed together and were wearing different versions of the same thing. So, Ladies' Room was adapted into a sitcom pilot called Just Temporary, with Kudrow and Miller reprising their roles, but the pilot was not picked up. Around this time, film executives at Disney's subsidiary Touchstone came across Schiff's play while looking for a female version of Wayne's World. Schiff was initially reluctant to adapt the play into a film, thinking some scenes would not transfer well into a movie. After Schiff pondered about what it might be like if Romy and Michelle were invited to their high school reunion, and it wasn't until they fill out the questionnaire when they realized their lives hadn't amounted to anything that seemed funny to me. Schiff began work on the script, which she would spend the next 5 years developing. Schiff based the character's friendship partly on her relationship with her best friend. One day, we were stuck on a plane on a tarmac and started reading the Sky Mall catalog and laughing our asses off. That was the kind of friend you'd want to hang out with. That even stuck on a plane on the tarmac, you can still have fun. Yeah, it's interesting. Also, too, apparently Sandy's arrival and exit at the reunion in the helicopter is a reference to Don Simpson's. Don Simpson once felt compelled to arrive to his 20th reunion in this helicopter with two Playboy playmates, or penthouse pets depending on the source, showed his face there for 30 minutes and left with them. Funny. Also, too, at the time of filming, Mira Sorvino was dating Quentin Tarantino. Slight references to Tarantino's productions can be found throughout the movie. In the scene where Romy and Michelle are pigging out in their living room, a takeout bag from Big Kahuna Burger is visible, and an ad for Red Apple cigarettes can be seen on the building next to their apartment. Big Kahuna Burger and Red Apple cigarettes are fictitious brands that had previously appeared in Reservoir Dogs, Pulp Fiction, Four Rooms, and From Dusk Till Dawn, and would reappear in future project that Tarantino wrote, produced, and or directed. Interesting. And there was a prequel movie that came out in 2005 called Romy and Michelle in the Beginning. It was released as a TV film on ABC Family that was written and directed by Robin Schiff. And there was a musical adaptation that premiered at the Fifth Avenue Theater in Seattle, Washington on June 2017. The musical, directed by Kristen Hange, who did Rock of Ages, stars Courtney Wolfson and Stephanie Renee as Romy and Michelle. Orange is the New Black and Weeds composers Gwendolyn Sanford and Brandon J. wrote the music and lyrics to original songs, including Businesswoman Special, 10 Years, I Invented Post-its, and Changing Lives One Outfit at a Time. And then also too, in 2022, Kudrow and Sorvino appeared as their characters to present the award for Best Ensemble Comedy Series at the 2022 Screen Actors Guild Awards. And I do want to note too that for years now there have been talks of a sequel, and as of right now, at least at the time of this recording, there have been no official talks on that. But I wouldn't be surprised if there were to be a sequel. Now, imagine if there were to be a sequel, probably, I don't know, maybe set years later. Hopefully, they are still having their, maybe they have a fashion empire at this point. And I wonder though if Romy and Michelle would still be living together. I mean, it'll be kind of weird at this point if they were years later. But hey, who knows? Who knows? And yeah, I would be interested in the sequel. I want to know where the character's at. Maybe it'll be called Romy and Michelle 30 years later, something like that. But we'll see. All right. Now, final question. Should this movie be rediscovered? And I say absolutely yes. It's a fun movie. I would say the themes for this movie are on point. I would say the acting is on point and also has a decent soundtrack. So I recommend you check that out. All right, so that pretty much concludes this episode of the podcast. So you can find me on Instagram, X, Blue Sky, YouTube, and Linktree at Nomfanelo. You can find the podcast on Instagram, X, Blue Sky, YouTube, and Linktree at RD Movies Pod. Visit buymeacoffee.com/RD Movies Pod to support the podcast via donation and also to look at exclusive posts there. Also, to join the Rediscovered Movies Hub, which is our community group on the official Wix website, which is rdmoviespod.wixsite.com/official, where you can interact with others, share thoughts on the podcast, and more. On Spotify, you can answer the feature poll, leave a comment, and rate the podcast. On Apple Podcasts, Good Pods, and Podchaser, you can leave a review and rate the podcast. And you can submit questions, comments, or suggestions by email, which is rediscoveredmovies@gmail.com. Or you could fill out the contact form on our link tree to be featured on a Q&A episode, which will air after the end of the season. So I want to say thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope to catch you on the next one.